There comes a moment in life when the greatest act of power is not staying. It's not fighting harder. It's not trying one more time. It's not explaining your position one more time. It's disappearing. No drama, no grand announcements, no elaborate goodbyes. You simply recognize that this space, this relationship, this job, this version of your life has already served its purpose. And you leave. Quietly, definitively, without looking back. Modern culture trains you to believe that leaving something is weakness, that if you were truly strong, you'd find a way to make it work, that if you were truly brave, you'd stay and fight until the end. That leaving means you failed, that you gave up, that you weren't enough, but it's exactly the opposite. Staying in a space that has already fulfilled its purpose is not strength. It's fear disguised as commitment. Remaining in a situation that drains you is not courage. It's self-destruction disguised as loyalty. Keep explaining yourself to people who will never understand is not perseverance. It's exhaustion disguised as hope. Marcus Aurelius understood this with a clarity most people never reach. As emperor, he had the power to stay in any situation, to force outcomes, to impose his will. Yet he wrote something that exposes a truth few are willing to admit. You have power over your mind, not over external events. Realize this, and you will find strength. Part of that power is knowing when to let go. When leaving is wiser than staying. When your absence will do more than your presence. When disappearing is the only move that preserves your integrity. I'm not talking about running from responsibility. I'm not talking about leaving when things get hard. I'm not talking about avoiding necessary conflict. I'm talking about something entirely different. I'm talking about the moment when you've given everything you had to give. When you've tried every reasonable way to make it work. When you've clearly communicated your needs and they've been consistently ignored. When the cost of staying outweighs any benefit of remaining. That moment when the only wise choice is to leave. And most people don't, because they confuse leaving with failing. Seneca observed this constantly in Rome. People trapped in situations that consumed them because they were afraid of being seen as quitters. And he wrote something that should completely free you. It is not because things are difficult that we do not dare. It is because we do not dare that things are difficult. Staying in a toxic space doesn't get easier with time. It becomes more destructive. Remaining in a relationship that empties you doesn't improve by waiting. It deteriorates more deeply. Staying in a job that kills your soul is never justified later. It only kills more of you. The difficulty of leaving doesn't shrink by postponing it. It grows. So what looks like bravery, staying and enduring, is often just fear of making the hard decision now. Epictetus, who lived in situations where he couldn't leave physically, taught something profound about leaving internally. It is not things themselves that disturb us, but our judgments about them. There are situations where you can leave physically, and you should, when it's time. There are situations where you can't leave physically yet, but you can leave emotionally. You can stop investing emotional energy where it doesn't belong. You can stop trying to control what was never under your control. You can disappear internally from battles that were never yours to fight. Both forms of leaving require the same recognition. This space no longer serves my growth, my peace, or my purpose. And staying longer honors nothing. It only prolongs the inevitable. You've probably seen this in your own life. Relationships you knew were over months or years before they finally ended. Jobs you knew you should leave long before you actually quit. Friendships you knew were toxic but kept because of shared history. Versions of yourself you knew you needed to let go of but carried because they felt familiar. And in every case, when you finally had the courage to leave, you probably thought the same thing. Why did I wait so long? Why did I stay when I already knew it was time to go? The answer is because you confused leaving with failing. Because you believed staying was the right thing, even when everything in you knew leaving was the wise thing. Because you prioritized how others would see you over how you felt inside. Marcus Aurelius practiced something specific around this. He regularly asked himself about every area of his life. Does this still serve my growth, or does it persist only by inertia? Relationships, responsibilities, commitments, identities, beliefs. If something persisted only out of inertia, fear of letting go, or attachment to how it used to be, he knew it was time to leave. Not dramatically, not destructively. He simply recognized that the space had fulfilled its purpose. And he left. Seneca warned specifically against clinging to what had already run its course. We cling to everything as if it were permanent. We refuse to let go of what has already passed. And that clinging is the source of most of our unnecessary suffering. Every person, every situation, every version of yourself has a temporary purpose. Some last years, some last decades, some last a lifetime, but many have an expiration date. And recognizing that expiration is not ingratitude, it's wisdom. You can be grateful for what something was, and honestly recognize that it is no longer that. You can honor what someone meant to you and admit that there is no longer mutual space to grow. You can appreciate who you were in an earlier season and let go of that identity to become who you need to be now. Leaving does not erase the value of what was. It simply acknowledges that its time has passed. Epictetus taught his students something radical about detachment. Everything is borrowed. Everything will eventually return to its source. So, enjoy it fully while it is present, and release it fully when it is time to go. The problem is not holding on while something still serves your growth. The problem is holding on after it no longer does because you're afraid to let go. That fear keeps you trapped in versions of your life that have already expired. And the longer you stay, the more it costs you in energy, in peace, in possibility. What follows are 5 principles about the power of disappearing at the right moment. 5 truths modern culture hides because it wants you to believe that leaving is weakness. But the Stoics knew better. They knew that sometimes the most powerful act is simply recognizing when a cycle has ended and quietly stepping into the next. No elaborate explanations, no defensive justifications, no performative drama. Just the clarity of knowing your presence no longer serves, and the strength to act on that clarity. Before we continue, before we explore the 5 principles that will transform your relationship with leaving, you need to do more than listen passively. You need to make a specific commitment, not a private thought you forget when guilt appears for wanting to leave, not a vague intention that dissolves when others question your decision. A public declaration that creates real accountability. Go to the comments right now and write exactly this. I have permission to leave when I'm no longer growing. Those words are not just a motivational phrase. They are your acknowledgement that you've been staying in spaces that already expired because you believed leaving meant betraying yourself or others, and that you've decided your growth, your peace, and your integrity matter more than the appearance of loyalty to spaces that drain you. Do it now, pause this audio, go to the comments. Write, "I have permission to leave when I'm no longer growing." That act of public declaration makes your permission real in a way private thought never does. The Stoics understood the power of public vows. They knew that when you declare your intention externally, when you make it visible to others, you create a force that dramatically multiplies your ability to act on it. Because it's no longer just a promise to yourself that you can quietly break when guilt shows up. It's a commitment others have seen. And that visibility creates accountability that turns intention into action. This is your moment. Not to learn abstract philosophy about letting go, but to honestly confront which spaces in your life have already served their purpose and which you're still occupying out of fear, inertia, or guilt. And to give yourself permission to leave. Not someday, when it's easier. Now, when it's time. First principle. Recognize when a space has fulfilled its purpose. There is an absolute difference between a difficult space that still has purpose and an exhausted space that persists only out of inertia. Most people confuse the two. And that confusion keeps them trapped for years in situations they should have left long ago. A difficult space still challenges you to grow. An exhausted space only drains you with no return. A purposeful space makes you uncomfortable because you are expanding. A purposeless space empties you because you are shrinking. The difference is not always obvious, but it is always felt. Your body knows before your mind is willing to admit it. That sense of depletion that no longer recovers with rest. That heaviness that appears when you think about going back to that place. That relief you feel when you don't have to be there. Those are not signs of weakness. They are signs of wisdom trying to communicate with you. Marcus Aurelius constantly faced difficult spaces as emperor. Wars, plagues, betrayals, crushing responsibilities. But he wrote something specific about how he distinguished difficulty with purpose from meaningless suffering. Ask yourself constantly, is this necessary? Because most of what we do and say is not necessary. And if you can eliminate it, you will have more tranquility and time. Not all difficulties are necessary. Not all commitments are important. Not all battles are yours to fight. And when you distinguish between what is necessary and what persists only by inertia, you gain clarity about what to release. The clearest sign that a space has fulfilled its purpose is simple, yet most people ignore it. You no longer grow there. You are merely maintaining yourself or diminishing. Seneca expressed this with brutal precision. If you are in a place where you cannot flourish, that place is your prison no matter how beautiful it looks from the outside. You may be in a relationship that looks perfect from the outside, the ideal couple according to social media, the romantic story everyone admires. But if internally there is no mutual growth, only stagnant coexistence, where both have become smaller versions of who they once were, that space has already fulfilled its purpose. Shared history does not make it current. External appearance does not make it real. You may be in a job that looks enviable from the outside. The impressive title, the competitive salary, the generous benefits. But if internally you are slowly dying, if every Monday you feel that weight in your chest, if you stopped learning years ago and now only repeat mechanically, that space has already fulfilled its purpose. External prestige does not compensate for internal death. You may be in a city that looks ideal from the outside. Perfect weather, abundant opportunities, the life everyone wants. But if internally you feel trapped with no possibility, if you long for something you can't even name, if you know there is a version of you that can only exist somewhere else, that space has already fulfilled its purpose. Objective perfection doesn't matter when subjectively you are suffocating. External appearance does not determine whether a space still serves you. Your internal experience does. And if you have been ignoring your internal experience because the external one seems too good to leave, you have been betraying yourself for far too long. Epictetus taught something specific about recognizing when it is time to leave. When a situation no longer allows you to live according to your values, when it repeatedly forces you to compromise who you are, that situation is no longer appropriate for you. Not all difficult situations require you to leave. Those that challenge you to grow while preserving your integrity are valuable, even when they are uncomfortable. Those that force you to compromise your values just to remain are toxic, regardless of external benefits. The difference is critical. A difficult job that challenges you professionally, makes you better at your craft, expands your abilities, respects your personal boundaries, and never asks you to betray your principles, that job still serves your growth. Keep it. The difficulty is an investment, not a cost. A job that pays well but requires you to betray your values regularly, that asks you to compromise your integrity in small accumulating ways, that makes you act in ways you don't respect just to keep the paycheck. That job has fulfilled its purpose, no matter how much it pays. Leave it. The salary does not compensate for the loss of yourself. A difficult relationship where both people are genuinely growing, where honest conflict leads to deeper understanding, where both challenge each other to become better versions, where difficulty is shared work towards something greater, that relationship still has deep purpose. Invest in it. Difficulty is the price of mutual growth. A relationship where one is growing and the other resists all change, where every difficult conversation becomes a battle that leads nowhere, where the difficulty is not shared work, but a one-sided struggle to preserve something that has already died, that relationship has fulfilled its purpose, no matter how many years you shared. Let it go. Shared history does not justify an unshared future. Marcus Aurelius practiced a specific question to evaluate every space in his life. Does this move me closer to who I want to be, or farther away? Not, is this comfortable? Because growth is rarely comfortable. Not, is this easy? Because what matters is rarely easy. But, does this move me toward the person I have chosen to become, or does it constantly compromise me? If the honest answer was that it pulled him away, required him to compromise his values, made him less of who he wanted to be, he knew it was time to leave. It didn't matter how much time he had invested. It didn't matter what others would think. It didn't matter how difficult the transition would be. If the space no longer served his growth toward who he wanted to be, staying longer meant betraying himself. And Marcus Aurelius refused to betray himself for comfort, appearance, or fear of change. Seneca warned specifically against using sunk time as a reason to stay. Do not say, "I have invested so much time here that I cannot leave now." Every additional day you remain after recognizing you should leave is more time wasted, not time recovered. This is known as the sunk cost fallacy, and it traps millions in exhausted situations. I've invested 5 years in this relationship. I can't leave now. That would waste those 5 years. But those 5 years are already gone. You lived them. You experience them. You don't recover them by staying 5 more years in something that doesn't work. In fact, staying 5 more years doesn't honor the first 5. It multiplies the waste. Now you didn't lose 5 years, you lost 10. And every additional year you stay is further loss, not recovery. I've invested 10 years building this career. It would be a waste to change now. But those 10 years taught you skills, gave you experience, showed you what you don't want. They are not lost if you change direction. They are lost if you stay 10 more years in something you hate just because you invested the first 10. Past time is irrelevant to the present decision. It is information, not obligation. The only relevant question is, does this space serve my growth now, based on who I am now and who I want to become? If not, leaving is not wasting what you invested. It is stopping further waste. It is honoring what you learned by using it to make the wise decision now. Epictetus taught his students a brutal but clarifying exercise. Imagine you are starting today, with no prior history with this person, this place, this situation. Would you choose to enter now, based on what it is today? If the honest answer is no, if you know you would never choose this, if you encountered it for the first time today, then you are staying for history, not for present value. And history is not a sufficient reason to remain where you no longer grow. History informs you. It does not bind you. You can fully honor what something was without obligating yourself to stay in what it has become. The practice that reveals when a space has fulfilled its purpose is uncomfortable but absolutely necessary. Identify the 3 main spaces in your life: your primary relationship or family situation, your work or career, your social context or community. For each one, take time to answer with brutal honesty that no one else will see. Does this space still challenge me to grow, or does it persist only through inertia and familiarity? Am I a better, more whole, more authentic person here? Or am I slowly diminishing, compromising who I am, acting as a smaller version of myself? Does this move me closer to who I want to be, or does it constantly compromise me just to keep the space? If I was starting from 0 today, if I had never met this person, never worked here, never lived in this city, would I choose this space based solely on its current reality, not its history or imagined potential? The honest answers will likely expose at least one space that fulfilled its purpose long ago. Maybe it ended a year ago and you've been in denial. Maybe 5 years ago and you've been running on inertia. Maybe a decade ago and you've been trapped by guilt. But it has definitely ended. And you have been staying not because the space serves you, but because you are afraid of what leaving means. Afraid to admit that something that once mattered no longer does. Afraid of disappointing people whose expectations you prioritized over your own well-being. Afraid of the temporary void that will exist between letting this go and finding what comes next. Afraid that leaving will confirm that you failed, when in reality, leaving confirms that you outgrew the space. Marcus Aurelius also recognized specific signs that a space had fulfilled its purpose. You feel constant depletion that does not recover, not normal fatigue from effort that resolves with rest, but existential exhaustion that persists no matter how much you sleep. You find yourself performing, pretending, acting, instead of being authentic. Not the normal adaptation we all make in different contexts, but a constant betrayal of who you truly are just to remain. Your values are regularly compromised, not through complex moral dilemmas but as a price of admission. Not hard ethical choices where both sides have merit, but situations where you know what is right and choose what is convenient because the space demands it. There are no longer real conversations, only automated, superficial exchanges. Not the comfort of knowing someone so well that words are unnecessary, but the absence of genuine connection disguised as familiarity. You feel genuine relief when you don't have to be there, and growing anxiety when you know you must return. Not the nervous anticipation of something challenging but meaningful, but existential dread at returning to something that drains you. Each of these signals clearly indicates that the space has fulfilled its purpose. That you are staying not because it serves you, but because leaving requires courage you haven't yet gathered. But that courage does not appear magically. You build it by honestly recognizing what has already ended and acting on that truth. Seneca closed his writings on this with a question meant to confront you brutally. How many more years will you live in spaces that have already expired because you are afraid to admit it is time to leave? How many more versions of a richer life will you sacrifice on the altar of refusing to let go of what is familiar? That question is not rhetorical, it is urgent, because every day you remain in a space that has already fulfilled its purpose is a day you are unavailable to spaces that still hold potential. Every year you spend where you no longer grow is a year of growth you will never recover. And at the end of your life, you will not look back with pride on the years you stayed out of fear. You will look back with regret on the years you could have lived differently if you had the courage to leave when you already knew it was time. Recognizing when a space has fulfilled its purpose is not failure, it is maturity. It is honoring what was without clinging to what no longer is. It is having the courage to release what is familiar and comfortable, to create space for what is unknown and possible. And that honest recognition is exactly where the true power of disappearing at the right moment begins. When you know internally that something has ended, but externally you keep participating, you live divided. When you finally align your outer actions with your inner truth and leave, you live with integrity. And that integrity, that courage to act on what you know is true, is exactly the power you have been looking for. Second principle. Your absence communicates more than 1,000 words. There comes a moment when you stop explaining yourself. When you recognize that people who require endless explanations will never understand, and that those who truly know you need no explanation at all. Your absence says everything that needs to be said, not dramatically, not vindictively, just definitively. You are simply no longer available to spaces that do not honor you, and that unavailability communicates your worth more clearly than any words ever could. Marcus Aurelius constantly faced people who demanded explanations for his decisions. As emperor, he could have justified every choice, defended every action, explained every move. But he wrote something that exposes the futility of explaining yourself to those who do not want to understand. Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one, not convince everyone that you are good, but be good, and your being will communicate more than your words. In the same way, your absence from spaces that no longer serve you communicates more than 1,000 explanations of why you left. People who respect boundaries do not need elaborate justifications. People who do not respect boundaries will not accept any justification, no matter how detailed. So endlessly explaining yourself to those who are determined not to understand is a waste of energy you could be using to rebuild in a new direction. Seneca expressed this with brutal clarity. He who remains in endless debate about his worth with those who deny it has already lost before he begins. Your worth is not up for debate. Either they recognize it or they don't. And if they don't, your absence is the only answer required. Think about how much energy you have spent explaining yourself to people who were never going to understand. Explaining why you need boundaries to those who benefit from you having none. Explaining why the space no longer works to those who are comfortable with it not working for you. Explaining why you need to leave to those who are invested in you staying. Every circular conversation where you end more exhausted than when you began. Every attempt to make them understand that ends with them manipulating the conversation until you are the problem. Every justification you offer that is then used as evidence that you haven't thought it through enough. All that effort wasted trying to gain permission from people who were never going to give it. Because your leaving does not benefit them. Your absence unsettles them. Your boundary challenges them. So they will do everything they can to convince you that leaving is selfish, impulsive, unjustified, dramatic. Not because they genuinely believe that, but because your staying serves them. Epictetus taught something radical about this. You owe no account of your decisions to those who do not live with their consequences. If someone does not carry your weight, they have no right to question how you carry it. The people who criticize you for leaving are not offering to make the space more tolerable for you. They are not saying, "Stay, and we will work together to improve this." They are saying, "Stay and keep carrying what I don't want to carry." Or, "Stay because your leaving makes me uncomfortable." If you won't, your well-being is not their priority. Their comfort is. And when you finally recognize that, when you see that all those circular conversations will never lead to genuine understanding, the only wise response is to stop explaining yourself. Not to announce dramatically that, "I will no longer explain myself." Simply to stop doing it. Leave quietly. Disappear completely. Become unavailable for debate about your decision. Your absence communicates everything. This space no longer serves me. My presence has ended. There is no debate about this. Marcus Aurelius practiced this specifically with people who constantly demanded his energy without reciprocity. He did not have elaborate conversations about boundaries. He did not justify his unavailability. He simply was not available. And his absence communicated clearly, "My time has value, and I no longer invest it here." Those who respected him accepted this without drama. Those who did not complained, manipulated, tried to induce guilt. But his absence remained, because he understood that explaining yourself to those who do not respect boundaries is impossible. Seneca also practiced distinguishing between people who deserved explanation and those who were only seeking ammunition. To those who genuinely love and respect you, a brief explanation is enough. They understand because they want to understand. To those invested in your staying for their own benefit, no explanation will ever be enough. They will question because they need you to doubt. The difference is critical. There are people in your life who, when you say, "I need to leave, this space no longer serves my growth," respond with, "I understand. I support you. I'm here if you need anything." Apporter. They don't demand details. They don't question your judgment. They don't try to convince you to stay. They trust that you know your own experience better than they do. And they prioritize your well-being over their preference that you remain. Those people deserve an honest but brief conversation, not because you owe them justification, but because mutual respect deserves basic clarity. But there are other people who respond to the same decision with, "But why? Are you sure? Aren't you exaggerating? Shouldn't you try harder? What will others say? Don't you think?" Each question is a hook, designed to pull you into endless debate. Each challenge is an attempt to make you doubt what you already know is true. Each piece of advice is really manipulation disguised as concern. Those people do not deserve elaborate explanations because they are not seeking to understand. They are seeking reasons to invalidate your decision. And the more you explain, the more ammunition you give them to question you. Epictetus taught his students something specific about leaving without explanation. Your life is yours to live, not to defend. You owe no justification for how you choose to live to those who do not live with the consequences of your choices. This does not mean being cruel or unnecessarily mysterious. It means recognizing the difference between communicating decisions to those who will respect them and justifying decisions to those who will attack them. To the first, brief, honest clarity. To the second, definitive absence without debate. The specific practice that turns this from concept into reality is uncomfortable but liberating. The next time you decide to leave and someone demands a detailed explanation, ask yourself internally before responding, is this person genuinely seeking to understand in order to support me, or are they looking for reasons to invalidate my decision? If it is the first, offer basic clarity. This space has fulfilled its purpose for me. I need to leave to continue growing. Thank you for understanding. No unnecessary details. No defensive justifications. Just simple truth. If it is the second, offer only, I have made this decision after careful consideration. It is not up for debate. And then hold that boundary, no matter how much they push. Not, let me explain more so you can understand. Not, if you let me justify myself, you'll see it makes sense. Just, I have decided. It is not up for debate. My absence is my answer. That firmness without elaboration communicates something powerful. Your decision does not require their approval. Marcus Aurelius also recognized that your absence often reveals more about the space you left than any words ever could. When you leave a toxic space, that space typically reacts in ways that fully validate your decision. If it was a toxic job, your absence often exposes how much they relied on your overcompensation. Without you, the systemic problems you were covering up become obvious. If it was an imbalanced relationship, your absence often reveals how much you were carrying unilaterally. Without you, the other person struggles with basic things you were handling. If it was a parasitic friendship, your absence often shows how much they took without giving. Without you, they complain about not having anyone to listen to them, even though they never listen to you. Your absence does not need to be explained. It explains itself through how the space reacts once you are no longer carrying what was never yours to carry. Seneca wrote something about this that exposes an uncomfortable truth. People rarely value your presence properly until they experience your absence. And if your absence does not teach them your value, then it was never your presence they valued, but what you did for them. This reveals something critical about what you were sustaining. If you leave, and they genuinely miss you, your essence, your company, who you are, then there was real value shared between you. If you leave and they miss what you did, what you provided, how you made them feel, but not who you truly are, then it was never a real relationship. It was a transaction. And leaving transactions disguised as relationships requires no explanation. Your absence simply ends the transaction. And that is sufficient communication. Epictetus warned specifically against seeking understanding from those incapable of giving it. Do not expect the blind to see. Do not expect the deaf to hear. And do not expect selfish people to understand decisions that prioritize your well-being over their convenience. This sounds harsh, but it is liberating. Because as long as you expect them to understand, you remain entangled, explaining yourself in increasingly elaborate ways. When you accept that they will not understand, that they cannot understand because they are too invested in you, staying, you free yourself to simply leave, without guilt, without endless justification, without needing their blessing. Your absence is enough. It communicates everything necessary, and it preserves your energy for rebuilding rather than wasting it on defense. The deepest truth about your absence as communication is this: the right people for you will understand, even with minimal explanation. The wrong people for you will question, even with endless explanation. So the amount of explanation you give does not determine whether they understand. Their capacity and willingness to understand determines that. And you do not control their capacity or willingness. You only control how much energy you spend trying to do the impossible. Make someone invested in your staying. Understand why you need to leave. Marcus Aurelius summarized this perfectly. Do not waste the remainder of your life hating and attacking yourself for things you cannot control. Do what is yours to do. Let go of what is not yours to carry. Endlessly explaining yourself to those determined not to understand is not yours to do. Leaving when you recognize that a space has fulfilled its purpose is yours to do. And your absence, silent and definitive, communicates everything that those capable of understanding need to know. The rest is not your responsibility to resolve. Third principle: release what you can no longer carry. There is a weight you have been carrying for far too long, not because you are strong, but because you are afraid of what it would mean to put it down. That job that exhausts you but that you should be grateful to have. That relationship that drains you but that you invested so much time building. Well, that identity that no longer fits you but that everyone expects you to maintain. That version of yourself that makes others happy but destroys you internally. You carry it not because you can, but because you believe you must. And that imagined must is slowly destroying you. Marcus Aurelius, who literally carried the weight of an empire, wrote something that should completely liberate you. It is not necessary to endure everything that comes your way. It is necessary to endure only what serves your highest nature. Everything else can be released without guilt. Not every burden deserves to be carried. Not every responsibility is truly yours. Not every duty is legitimate. And learning to distinguish between what is genuinely yours to carry and what you have assumed out of guilt, external expectation, or fear, that distinction is critical. Seneca observed this constantly in Rome, people collapsing under weights that were never theirs to carry, and he wrote something brutal about it. Most people are not destroyed by what life places on them. They are destroyed by what they voluntarily take on to satisfy the expectations of others. Think about what you are carrying right now. How much of it is genuinely yours? How much did you assume because someone else did not want to carry it? How much are you holding because you were told this is what success looks like, or this is what responsible people do? How much are you carrying because you fear disappointing people whose expectations you never agreed to fulfill? The honest answer is probably most of it. Most of what you carry is not truly yours. It is external expectation you internalized as obligation, and now it is destroying you, not because you are weak, but because you are carrying the weight of multiple lives in addition to your own. Epictetus taught something precise about distinguishing what is truly yours to carry. There are things under your control and things outside your control. The former are your genuine responsibility. The latter were never yours to carry, no matter who convinced you otherwise. Under your control, your actions, your values, your decisions, your effort. Outside your control, outcomes, other people's behavior, external perceptions, circumstances. If you are carrying weight trying to control what you cannot control, you are carrying a burden that was never yours. If you feel responsible for how others feel about your boundaries, you are carrying their emotional labor in addition to your own. If you feel obligated to compensate for broken systems or other people because someone has to do it, you are carrying responsibilities that do not belong to you. If you feel guilty for prioritizing your well-being because it inconveniences others, you are carrying their expectation that you sacrifice yourself endlessly for their comfort. Every one of those burdens can be released, not because you are selfish, but because they were never yours. Marcus Aurelius practiced a specific question whenever he felt overwhelmed by weight. Is this burden mine according to my true role, or did I take it on according to the expectations of others? As emperor, some burdens were genuinely his: state decisions, military leadership, administrative justice. But many burdens others tried to place on him: opinions about how he should live his personal life, expectations of who he should be to fulfill fantasies of the perfect emperor, demands for constant access. Those were not his, and he released them without guilt. Because he understood that carrying burdens that were not his would not only destroy him, it would make him incapable of carrying the burdens that truly were his responsibility. Seneca taught something similar about finite capacity. Your energy is limited. Every burden you carry that is not yours is energy unavailable for what truly is your responsibility. Carrying everything is not virtue. It is poor management of finite resources. This directly confronts the cultural narrative that you can handle everything if you are just strong enough. You cannot handle everything. No one can. Human capacity is finite. And when you try to carry everything, true responsibilities plus external expectations, plus imposed guilt, plus imagined duties, you do not become stronger. You become less capable of carrying even what is genuinely yours. Because you are so exhausted holding weights that do not belong to you that you have no energy left for what does. The practice that reveals which burdens you can release is brutally honest. Make a list of everything you are currently carrying. Every commitment, every responsibility, every "I must do this." Then, for each one, ask yourself clearly, is this genuinely my responsibility according to my real role, or did I take it on out of external expectation, guilt, or fear of disappointing others? Would releasing this truly destroy me, or would it simply inconvenience people who benefit from me carrying it? Does carrying this allow me to fulfill my genuine responsibilities better, or does it drain me so much that I fail at what truly is mine? If I had never taken this on, and someone asked me to carry it today, would I say yes based on my current capacity? Honest answers will likely reveal multiple burdens you can release, that you must release, not out of selfishness, but out of survival. Because if you collapse under weight that is not yours, you will also be unable to carry what is. Epictetus warned specifically against martyrdom. He who destroys himself carrying what others refuse to carry is not virtuous, he is foolish, and his eventual collapse helps no one. This confronts the cultural glorification of endless sacrifice. Work until you collapse, always put others first, never say no, be everything to everyone. Those are not values. They are prescriptions for self-destruction. And when you finally collapse, when your body and mind refuse to continue, no one will thank you for carrying what was never yours. They will replace you. And look for the next person willing to destroy themselves for external expectations. So, leaving before collapse, releasing before breaking, setting boundaries before you have nothing left to give, that is not abandonment. It is wisdom. It is survival. It is the only act that preserves your ability to continue being useful in your genuine responsibilities. Marcus Aurelius also recognized that releasing is not binary. It is not carry everything or carry nothing. It is carry what is genuinely mine with excellence and release what was never mine without guilt. That distinction requires brutal clarity about what is truly yours. Your job is yours. Chronic overwork, compensating for dysfunctional systems, is not. Your family is your responsibility. Being an unpaid emotional therapist for capable adults is not. Your growth is yours. Sacrificing your growth so others can remain comfortable in stagnation is not. Your peace is your responsibility. Maintaining false peace by tolerating destructive behavior is not. The line is clear when you dare to look at it honestly, but most people do not look because they fear what they will see. That they have been carrying the weight of multiple people because they are afraid of being seen as selfish if they carry only what is truly theirs. Seneca closed his writings on this with a devastating question. How much more of yourself will you sacrifice on the altar of external expectations before you recognize that the only thing you owe others is to live according to your values, not according to their convenience? That question is not theoretical. It is urgent, because every day you carry what is not yours is a day you do not have full energy for what is. Every year you spend being everything to everyone is a year you were not fully yourself for yourself and for those who genuinely deserve your energy. And in the end, when you are completely exhausted, when you have nothing left to give, you will realize that you sacrificed your entire life for burdens that were never yours, and no one will thank you, because you will no longer be useful. Releasing what you can no longer carry is not weakness. It is honesty. It is recognizing that your capacity is finite, that your energy is limited, that your life is one, and that carrying only what is genuinely yours with excellence serves the world far more than carrying everything with collapsing mediocrity. Marcus Aurelius lived this. He carried the weight of an empire, but he constantly released expectations that did not serve his true role. He did not try to be liked by everyone. He did not try to satisfy every opinion. He did not carry guilt for difficult but necessary decisions. He carried what was genuinely his according to his role, and he released everything else. And that ruthless selectivity about what to carry is exactly what allowed him to carry what truly was his for decades without collapsing. You have the same permission. Release what was never yours so you can carry what genuinely is yours with excellence. That is not abdication of responsibility. It is clarity about where your responsibility truly lies. And when you finally release what you can no longer carry, you will discover something liberating. You were not weak for not being able to carry everything. You were being destroyed, trying to carry what no single human being was ever meant to carry alone. And releasing that is not failure. It is survival. It is sanity. It is the only act that preserves your ability to remain who you are for what truly matters. Fourth principle: protect your peace as if it were your only treasure. There is something you possess that is more valuable than any relationship, any job, any external achievement: your inner peace. And most people treat it as if it were negotiable, renewable, infinitely restorable. You sacrifice it to maintain relationships that drain you. You compromise it for jobs that exhaust you. You abandon it for expectations you never agreed to fulfill. And every time you sacrifice it, you tell yourself, "I'll get it back later." But later never comes, because you remain in the same spaces that destroy your peace. And eventually you find yourself living without consistent peace, believing this is normal, that this is adult life, that everyone lives this way. But that is a lie. Marcus Aurelius, who faced pressures that would break most people, wrote something that should confront you brutally. You have power over your mind, not over external events. Realize this, and you will find strength. But he added something more specific about peace. If you seek peace, do less. Or more precisely, do only what is essential. Because most of what we do and say is unnecessary. And when you remove what is unnecessary, you gain not only time, but also the tranquility that comes from knowing your life is your own. Peace is not something you find during occasional retreats while living chaotically the rest of the time. It is the baseline state from which you operate once you have relentlessly removed everything that destroys it. And removing what destroys your peace often means leaving spaces, people, and versions of yourself that culture tells you that you should maintain. Seneca expressed this with devastating precision. Peace is not the absence of external conflict. It is the presence of internal clarity about what deserves your energy and what does not. You can be in objectively difficult situations and still have peace if those situations serve your true purpose. You can be in outwardly perfect circumstances and live without peace if those circumstances constantly betray your inner values. Peace does not come from perfect external conditions. It comes from internal alignment between your values and your actions. And every time you compromise your values to maintain a situation, you destroy your peace. No matter how perfect that situation looks from the outside, Epictetus taught something radical about protecting peace. No one can take away your peace without your consent. Every time you lose your peace, it is because you allowed something external to determine your internal state. This can sound like self-blame, but it is the opposite. It is empowerment. It is recognizing that your peace is under your control, not perfectly, not easily, but definitively through the decisions you make about what you allow into your mental and emotional space. When you stay in a relationship that constantly creates unnecessary drama, you have chosen that drama over your peace. When you stay in a toxic job that drains you existentially, you have chosen that paycheck over your peace. When you allow people without boundaries constant access to your time and energy, you have chosen their comfort over your peace. Each of these is a choice. It does not always feel like a choice, but it is. And the moment you see it as a choice, you regain the power to choose differently. Marcus Aurelius practiced something specific to protect his peace. Constant evaluation of what had access to his inner space. Not physically, but mentally and emotionally. Does this person, this commitment, this situation improve my peace or destroy it? Not, is this person important? Not, should I value this commitment? But, does my peace improve or deteriorate by keeping this in my life? If it consistently worsened, he knew distance was necessary. Not out of cruelty, out of survival. Because an emperor without peace cannot rule wisely, and a human without peace cannot live fully. Seneca warned specifically against sacrificing peace for appearances. We prefer to live in chaos that makes us look successful, rather than in peace that makes us look simple. And this foolish exchange is why most people live miserably while appearing to live well. This directly confronts hustle culture, grind culture, the narrative of sacrifice now, enjoy later. That narrative trains you to believe peace is something you will earn later, after you achieve enough, accumulate enough, impress enough, but later never arrives. Because every achieved goal reveals another goal. Every accomplishment creates a new expectation. Every level of success brings new problems. So you spend your entire life chasing future peace while sacrificing present peace. And in the end, you realize you never had peace. Only external achievements that did not compensate for internal absence. Epictetus taught his students something brutally honest. The one who expects to have peace after achieving his goals will never have peace. Because goals are infinite, and peace is now or never. Peace is not a destination you reach after accomplishing enough. It is a state you cultivate now by relentlessly eliminating what destroys it. And what destroys it is often exactly what you are chasing, believing it will bring peace. That prestigious job that takes all your time. That relationship that looks perfect from the outside but empties you inside. That social identity that maintains appearances while betraying who you truly are. The practice that reveals what is destroying your peace is uncomfortable but absolutely necessary. For 1 week, every night, ask yourself specifically, when did I lose my peace today? What person, situation, or commitment destroyed it? Not vague generalities, brutal specificity. Not work in general, but that specific meeting with that specific person who constantly invalidates my contribution. Not my relationship, but that specific pattern where I express a clear need and it is consistently ignored. Not my social obligations, but that specific event where I pretended for 3 hours to be someone I'm not, to meet the expectations of people I barely know. Every loss of peace has a specific source. And when you identify those sources precisely, you gain clarity about what must be removed. Marcus Aurelius also understood that protecting peace does not mean avoiding everything difficult. It means distinguishing between difficulty that serves your growth and chaos that only destroys your peace. A challenging job that makes you better professionally can coexist with peace if the environment respects your boundaries and values your contribution. Constant chaos where you work hard and it is never enough, where boundaries are routinely violated, where effort is never acknowledged, destroys peace with no corresponding benefit. A difficult relationship where both people are genuinely working on issues can contain deep peace if there is mutual respect and shared effort. Relational chaos, where one works and the other resists, where effort is one-sided, where every difficult conversation becomes a battle, destroys peace without growth. The critical difference is this: does the difficulty come with respect, reciprocity, and shared purpose? Then it can coexist with peace. Does it come with disrespect, unilateral effort, and no shared purpose? Then it only destroys peace. Seneca practiced something specific when his peace felt threatened. First, he identified the precise source, not vague generalities, but exact clarity about what was destroying his peace. Second, he asked, "Is this necessary according to my true values, or does it persist out of inertia, fear, or external expectation?" Third, if it was not necessary, he removed it. Not gradually, decisively. Not, "I'll slowly reduce my exposure," but "This destroys my peace and does not serve my purpose, so it ends now." That decisiveness was not cruelty. It was clarity about priorities. Because he recognized what most people ignore. Your peace is the foundation from which everything else operates. Without peace, you cannot think clearly. You cannot love fully. You cannot create effectively. You cannot live authentically. So protecting your peace is not selfish. It is the prerequisite for being able to contribute meaningfully. Epictetus warned specifically against guilt about protecting peace. The one who feels guilty for protecting his peace has not understood that without peace he has nothing to offer. He is destroying himself for external expectations while pretending that this is virtue. This confronts the idea that always putting others first is virtuous. If you constantly put others first while destroying your peace, eventually you will have no peace left to offer. And then, not only you suffer, everyone who depends on you suffers as well, because you have nothing left to give. So fiercely protecting your peace is not abandoning others. It is ensuring that you can remain present for them sustainably. Marcus Aurelius lived this as emperor. He carried responsibility for millions, yet he protected his peace relentlessly. He created daily time for silent reflection. He set boundaries around who had access to his personal time. He continually released expectations that did not serve his true role, not because he was selfish, but because he understood that an emperor without peace cannot serve wisely, and a human without peace cannot live fully. You have the same responsibility to yourself, not to be perfect, but to protect the internal state from which all your external actions arise. And that means leaving spaces that destroy your peace, even when they look important from the outside, even when others question your decision, even when you are afraid of what letting go means, because in the end, your peace is not negotiable. It is not infinitely renewable. It is not something you will get back later. It is your only real treasure, and protecting it fiercely is the only act that allows you to live sustainably according to your values. Seneca closed one of his final writings with words that summarize this perfectly. "I have lived enough because I have lived with peace." The one who lives 100 years without peace has not lived. He has only existed. That distinction applies to you now. Are you living or merely existing? Do you have genuine peace, or only brief pauses between constant chaos? Do you protect your peace as your most valuable treasure, or do you regularly sacrifice it for things that will not matter in 10 years? Honest answers will likely reveal that you have been existing without truly living, remaining in spaces that destroy your peace because you are afraid of what leaving means. That fear is understandable, but it is less costly than continuing, because every additional day without peace is another day you do not truly live. And your life is too valuable, too brief, too precious to waste in an existence without peace. Fifth principle: leaving without resentment is the highest form of freedom. There is an absolute difference between leaving because something has ended and leaving while carrying resentment over how it ended. The first is freedom. The second is a portable prison. You can physically leave a place and still remain emotionally chained to it if you leave with resentment. Every thought of "it shouldn't have happened this way," every rumination of "they owed me better treatment," every mental conversation where you finally say what you never said, all of that is staying, not physically, emotionally. And as long as you remain emotionally in what you left, you are not truly free. Marcus Aurelius constantly faced situations that legitimately deserved resentment: betrayals by close people, political injustices, broken promises, false loyalties. He could have spent years ruminating on each one, compiling mental lists of grievances, planning righteous revenge, but he wrote something that exposes why resentment is a self-imposed prison. The best revenge is not to be like your enemy, and the best way to let go is to recognize that resentment harms you more than the one you direct it at. Resentment does not punish the person who hurt you. It punishes you. They have likely gone on with their lives without thinking about you, while you remain trapped in mental loops about what they did. They sleep peacefully, while you lose sleep replaying past injustices. They are available for their future, while you remain chained to your past. Seneca expressed it with brutal clarity: clinging to resentment is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. You only poison yourself while they remain untouched. This does not mean what happened was acceptable. It does not mean you didn't deserve better. It does not mean you should pretend it didn't matter. It means that carrying resentment does not fix anything. It only keeps you trapped. And while you are trapped in resentment about the past, you are not available to build your future. Epictetus taught something radical about letting go without resentment. When you leave something, decide whether you are leaving to be free or leaving to continue fighting it mentally. Only the first is truly leaving. There are people who physically leave jobs, relationships, cities, but mentally they never leave. Years later, they are still telling the same stories about how unfairly they were treated. They are still having the same mental conversations where they finally win arguments they never had. They are still justifying their departure to imaginary audiences that question their choice. Physically gone, emotionally trapped. And that emotional prison is worse than the original situation, because they carry it everywhere. Marcus Aurelius practiced something specific to leave without resentment, recognizing that people act according to their nature, not according to your preferences. When someone betrays you, disrespects you, or harms you, they are acting according to their current nature. Expecting them to act differently is as useless as expecting fire not to burn. This does not excuse their behavior, but it explains why resentment is useless. You are resentful because they acted according to their nature, but their nature is what it is, and your resentment does not change their nature. It only consumes your peace. So the wisest act is to recognize, this person is who they are. This situation was what it was. and to release your need for it to have been different, not because you liked it, but because resentment over what already happened changes nothing except your present state. Seneca practiced a clear distinction between justice and resentment. Seeking justice when possible is wise. Carrying resentment when there is nothing left to be done is foolish. If you can take appropriate legal, professional, or social action regarding an injustice, do it. That is justice, not resentment. But when no appropriate action remains, when all that is left is mental rumination over what happened, that is resentment. And resentment does not serve justice. It only serves your self-destruction. The practice that frees you from resentment is uncomfortable but absolutely necessary. Identify the situation or person toward whom you carry the strongest resentment. Then ask yourself with brutal honesty, is there any appropriate action I can take now that would actually correct this situation? If yes, take that action. Do not postpone. Take it and close the cycle. If no, then ask the second critical question. Does carrying this resentment change what happened, or does it only destroy my present peace? The honest answer is always the second. And when you recognize that your resentment harms only you while changing nothing, you gain the possibility of letting it go. Not because you forgive in the sense of what happened was okay, but because you recognize that carrying resentment is a choice, and you can choose to release it. Epictetus taught his students something specific about this. Forgiveness is not for the one who hurt you. It is for you, because as long as you do not forgive, you remain chained to the one who hurt you. This completely reframes forgiveness. It is not an act of generosity toward the person who harmed you. It is an act of freedom for yourself. It is not saying, what you did was acceptable. It is saying, what you did will not define my present. It is not reconciliation. It is liberation. You can forgive completely and never have contact again. Forgiveness does not require ongoing relationship. It only requires releasing your need for the past to have been different. Marcus Aurelius also understood that leaving without resentment does not mean forgetting. It means remembering without being controlled by the memory. Remember what happened. Learn from it. Use that learning to choose better in the future. But do not remain trapped, ruminating on it. Resentment is rumination without learning. It is reliving the pain without extracting the lesson. Wisdom is learning without rumination. It is extracting the lesson without constantly reliving the pain. You can remember that a person was not trustworthy without spending mental energy hating them. You can remember that a job was toxic without spending years telling stories about how bad it was. You can remember that a version of your life did not work without carrying shame for having been there. Memory serves you. Resentment destroys you. Seneca closed one of his writings on resentment with something devastating. I have known people who spent decades of their lives in resentment over situations that lasted only years. They sacrificed 30 years of peace for 5 years of past pain. What madness is that? That madness is common. Because resentment feels justified. I deserve to feel resentful. They treated me badly. I have the right to be angry. All of that is true. But having the right to resentment does not mean it serves you. You have the right. But exercising that right costs you more than it is worth. Leaving without resentment is not denying your right to be angry. It is choosing your freedom over your right to remain angry. Epictetus summarized this perfectly. You can have reason, or you can have peace. Rarely can you have both. And the one who chooses reason over peace lives correctly but miserably. This does not mean accepting injustice when you can change it. It means releasing resentment over injustices that have already happened and can no longer be changed, because carrying that resentment does not correct the injustice. It only keeps you miserable. And your life is too valuable to waste it being right but miserable. True freedom is leaving completely, physically and emotionally, recognizing that the space served its purpose, that the people are who they are, that the situation was what it was, not because you liked it, but because it is over. And remaining trapped in resentment over what is over is choosing prison when freedom is available. Marcus Aurelius died having released countless betrayals, injustices, and pains, not because he forgot them, not because he pretended they did not matter, but because he recognized that carrying resentment would only destroy his peace while changing nothing. And he chose peace over being right, freedom over impossible justice, future over past. That choice is available to you now, not someday when you're ready to forgive. Now, when you recognize that resentment is keeping you trapped in what you need to release, leaving without resentment is the highest freedom. Not because the one who hurt you deserves it, but because you deserve to be free. The power you always had, but were afraid to use. You have reached the end of these 5 principles. But this ending is not a conclusion. It is an invitation to exercise the power you always had but were taught to fear, the power to recognize when a space has fulfilled its purpose, and to leave without guilt. The power to let your absence communicate what 1,000 words never could. The power to release weights that were never yours to carry. The power to protect your peace as your only true treasure. The power to leave without resentment toward complete freedom. That power is not new. It has always lived inside you. But culture trained you to believe that using it was selfishness, weakness, failure, abandonment. You were convinced that staying was always more virtuous than leaving, that explaining yourself endlessly was more mature than disappearing quietly, that carrying everything was stronger than releasing what is unnecessary, that sacrificing your peace was nobler than protecting it fiercely, that holding resentment was more just than letting go without resentment. But all of that is a lie designed to keep you trapped, in jobs that exploit you, in relationships that drain you, in versions of yourself that satisfy others while destroying you internally. And while you are trapped, you are useful to systems and people who benefit from your staying. But leaving, disappearing at the right moment disrupts all of those systems. That is why you were taught to fear it. Marcus Aurelius understood this completely. As emperor, the entire structure depended on him remaining in his role. Yet he wrote something that reveals the power he exercised internally, even when he could not leave physically. You can leave life whenever you want. So live as if you could. That awareness that you could leave at any moment is exactly what frees you to live fully while you remain. He was not speaking about physical death. He was speaking about inner freedom. The freedom of knowing that you stay by conscious choice, not because you are trapped, that every day you are there is because you chose to be, not because you cannot leave. That awareness transforms your entire experience. From a victim of circumstances into an agent who chooses. And when you finally exercise that power and leave what has already fulfilled its purpose, you discover something liberating. You were not weak for leaving. You were strong for recognizing when it was time. You did not fail. You grew beyond that space. You did not abandon responsibility. You released weights that were never yours. Seneca lived his entire life aware of his power to leave. And when his final moment of departure arrived, he met it with the same calm he had practiced his whole life, without resentment toward what had been, without resistance to what was, only the recognition that the cycle had been completed. That peace at the end came from having practiced leaving his entire life, leaving spaces that no longer served, leaving people who did not respect boundaries, leaving versions of himself that were no longer authentic. He had practiced the art of disappearing at the right moment for decades. So when the final moment to disappear arrived, it was simply another expression of what he had mastered, letting go with grace when the time had come. Epictetus, who literally could not leave physically for many years, taught the power of leaving internally. Freedom is not doing what you want. It is wanting what you do, or changing what you do until it becomes what you want. When you cannot leave physically yet, you can leave emotionally. Stop investing your identity in temporary spaces. Stop seeking validation where it cannot be given. Stop carrying responsibilities that are not yours. And when you finally can leave physically, you will already have practiced the detachment that makes the transition natural rather than traumatic. The deepest truth about disappearing at the right moment is this: you are not abandoning anything valuable. You are creating space for what genuinely has value. You are not running from difficulty. You are choosing where to invest your finite energy. You are not being selfish. You are being honest about your capacity and your limits. And that honesty is exactly the power that transforms stagnant lives into fully lived lives. Before closing completely, there is something you need to confront. Right now, in this very moment, there is at least one space in your life that has already fulfilled its purpose. You know it. You have known it for months or years, but you have postponed leaving because you are afraid. Afraid of what it means. Afraid of how you will be seen. Afraid of the temporary void that will exist. That fear is understandable, but it is less costly than continuing. Because every additional day you remain in a space that has already fulfilled its purpose is a day you are unavailable for what could be. Every year you spend where you no longer grow is a lost year you will never recover. Marcus Aurelius would remind you of something urgent. Do not act as if you were going to live 10,000 years. Death hangs over you. While you live, while you can, be good. And being good to yourself means not wasting your one life in spaces that have already expired. It means exercising the power you always had, recognizing when it is time to leave, and leaving without guilt. Seneca would remind you of something else. It is not that we have little time, it is that we waste much of it, and the greatest waste of time is staying where you no longer grow while pretending that eventually it will get better. With money, it will not. You already know that. Your body knows it. Your intuition knows it. The only thing that does not know it is your fear, and fear is the worst advisor. Epictetus would leave you with one final truth. Do not wait for the perfect moment to leave. The perfect moment is when you recognize that it is time, and that moment is now. Not when it becomes easier. It never will. Not when everyone understands. Those who understand already do. Those who do not never will. Not when you have absolute certainty. You never will. The moment is now. When you recognize that it is already over, nothing is more powerful than disappearing at the right moment, not dramatically, not vindictively, simply, definitively, recognizing that the space fulfilled its purpose, appreciating what it was, and leaving toward what could be, without endless explanations, without defensive justifications, without carrying resentment, only the clarity of knowing that your presence no longer belongs there, and the courage to act according to that clarity. That power was always yours. The only question is, when will you use it? How many more days will you stay where you no longer grow? How many more years will you sacrifice your peace for spaces that destroy it? How much more of your one life will you spend in versions that have already expired? The answers to those questions determine whether you truly live or merely exist. And your life is too valuable, too brief, too precious to waste it existing where you could be living. The power to disappear at the right moment is not magic. It is clarity about what has ended. It is courage to act according to that clarity. It is the freedom of letting go without resentment. And that freedom, that is your real life waiting to be lived, not after something changes externally. Now, when you change your internal relationship with leaving, when you recognize that leaving is not failure, it is the most powerful act of someone who respects themselves enough not to remain where they no longer belong. That self-respect is exactly what transforms victims of circumstance into architects of lives lived according to genuine values. And that power was always yours. You were just waiting for permission to use it. Consider that permission granted, not by me, by the truth you always knew but were afraid to admit. You have permission to leave when you no longer grow. You have permission to protect your peace fiercely. You have permission to release what you can no longer carry. You have permission to disappear at the right moment. And that moment is exactly when you recognize that it is already over. When will that moment be for you? The answer is inside you right now. Listen to it, honor it, act on it, because your life is waiting to be lived. And every day you remain where it has already ended is one less day to live where you truly belong. Disappear at the right moment, not as weakness, but as the most powerful act of someone who finally respects themselves enough to release what has already fulfilled its purpose. That power was always yours. It is time to use it. Your voice matters here more than you think. Every insight you share strengthens and elevates this community, because this isn't just another space. It's a circle of people who choose to live with intention, with discipline, and with character. Each of you leaves a mark, and the reflection that receives the most support will be pinned as a banner of who we are. Not as decoration, but as a reminder of the kind of warrior who chooses to think, feel, and act with stoic clarity. Because this is a community that doesn't run from pain, it walks through it with courage. A community that doesn't look for cheap comfort, it seeks wisdom. A community that doesn't break under adversity, it turns it into strength. And if you've made it this far, it's because something inside you is already shifting. Something is waking up. Something is asking for more. So, before you leave, check the description. There you'll find the paths we created to help you keep strengthening your mind. They're not there by accident. Each one exists to help you go deeper, build inner resilience, and return again and again to that place within you where nothing and no one can take your peace. Subscribing isn't doing the podcast a favor. It's an act of respect toward yourself. It's choosing not to live on autopilot anymore. It's committing to think differently, to feel with more order, to live with more intention. Because every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, we publish reflections designed to stay with you when life gets heavy, when your mind gets loud, when you need a reminder of who you are. Not following us means risking missing the one lesson you might need in the hardest moment. And if you choose to go a step further, if you choose to become a member, understand one thing clearly. You're not donating, you're sustaining a mission. Because of you, this flame stays alive. Because of you, we can keep spreading Stoicism as a refuge for millions who are fighting not to give up. Your support is what keeps this podcast alive, strong, and growing. You're not a spectator, you're part of the foundation holding this community together. I'll see you in our next Stoicism for Winners session, where we'll keep exploring the depth of Stoic wisdom applied to everyday life. In the meantime, dive into the recommended sessions in the description and continue your path. And until we cross paths again, don't forget this. You are the master of your perception, the guardian of your peace, and the warrior of your own battle. That is the legacy of Stoicism. That is the art of becoming invincible.